I recorded this episode last night, and before I got it all put together, the files started coming in. I woke up this morning to even more. So after I'd talked about the initial motion for an extension of time, I kind of started blabbering away at you. But then at the 24-minute mark, I recorded this morning an update on all the new filings since then. Hi guys, I am finally back with you. Boy, have I missed doing this. I feel a little bit out of practice and very far behind. There have been so many filings since I was last here, and it feels a little overwhelming to try to catch up. But there was a nice short letter that was filed on April the 9th, so I thought I'd start here, especially because these memorandums for motions to dismiss are just piling up. There's just so many, and I just want to ask Judge Lyman, when are you going to decide these? I don't really want to cover them again, because there really isn't a lot of new information on each one. There's a lot of repetition. Blake's side are just unreasonably nasty. And the thought that there might be amended complaints and we get to start that whole process over is just an overwhelming thought. And while I was in the process of creating this one, there's yet another memorandum from Blake Lively to try to get dismissed. I don't think any of them are going to be dismissed. There's a possibility that the New York Times may be dismissed. But I'm really and truly hoping that there was enough substance there about this lack of subpoena, about her stepping out from under her privilege, the other case against the Rolling Stone that was successfully sued. I'm just really hoping there's enough in there to keep them in this lawsuit. But it just feels like an excessive amount of these, and I know that part of it is because each party is filing one, on Blake's side that is, not on Justin's side. And so it's much more overwhelming than when you just have one plaintiff, one defendant. But these back and forth memorandums, they just need to come to an end at some point. And what's happened is that Team Justin has asked for an extension of time to respond to the interrogatories. And they're also asking for a change in the scheduling order. They give a very reasonable explanation for why they're requesting these things. And not only are they petitioning the court for this, but there's also a disagreement between the two parties, which of course comes as no surprise. The letter's written on behalf of Justin, and it's asking for these two things. If you remember one of my first episodes about this case, I went over the scheduling order, and I made a little chart that we could keep referring to follow along with the deadlines for this trial. We have one coming up on April the 14th, and these are the responses to the interrogatories that were due last month on the 14th. It's been the style of Blake's team to wait until the very last minute, literally, to file their documents. Another method they like is to file a big pile of them simultaneously, and that's what they did with these interrogatories. Now the letter starts out by mentioning that this is done in accordance with Rule 1D of Your Honor's individual practices in civil cases. What this is referring to is that all judges in all states have to obey the rules of the law codes that they fall under. But each judge has what's called individual practices. These are their own rules for how they would like to handle cases in their particular courtroom. This has to do with motions, timelines, communications with chambers, extensions, redactions, size of filings, everything that will be encountered during a trial. These are supplied to all of counsel so that they're well informed about what is expected of them during the time that they will appear before this particular judge. So if we take a quick look at Judge Lyman's rules, we see that this 1D is all about extensions of time. It tells the attorneys everything they need to include when they file these. We see that list of 5 things, the original date, if there have been previous requests for extensions of time, because these requests for extensions of time are pretty common, and in some cases they use up 3 of them. So that's why he wants to know how many requests there's been. He wants to know if these were granted or denied, if opposing parties consent, and if they refuse consent, what is the reason? Lastly, they want to know the date of the next scheduled appearance. Sometimes these type of requests need to be heard before the judge before he can make a decision. So the judge needs to know, do you have one already lined up very soon where we could cover this? Or if it gets out of hand, am I going to have to schedule one? That's why that information's important. And it goes on to say that these have to be made at least 2 days prior to the deadline or the scheduled appearance. So keeping that in mind, that's what he fills in this letter. He says there's not been any previous request. And those of you who've been from my Murdaugh crew, you've seen this happen so many times. Not so much in Alex's case, but with Russell's or any case that Mark, time waster Moore, has his hands in. Judges are usually very reasonable about these requests. And really, this is the exact type of case that you would expect to see these. Because there is so much going on with it. There are so many defendants. There are so many plaintiffs. There are so many different lawsuits within the one big lawsuit. It's a lot to keep up with. No doubt it's even a lot for the judge to keep up with because he has to read all of these filings. In addition to what we see, there may be even more communications that we don't see. We have Team Justin suing Blake, Ryan, Leslie, the New York Times, and now we saw Jones Works was recently added. They've had to keep up with all of this. On top of that, all of those long-winded, aggressive motions to dismiss, and then this back and forth with all of these memorandums. Between the two, Team Blake really has a much lighter load. They have less defendants. Team Justin hasn't filed a single motion to dismiss, so they've only had to deal with their own motions to dismiss, and Jed Wallace. Who, by the way, speaking of Jed Wallace, did you see that after all the fighting in the New York court, and we got to listen into that hearing, they fought so hard, first back and forth in letters to the judge, ultimately a hearing, because Team Blake wanted to secure that attorney's eyes only designation on top of the already in place protections. Their two biggest concerns that they kept mentioning were personal information like addresses and medical information. When they filed a response to the Texas court, they doxed Jed Wallace's address and his medical condition. Now, to me, this cannot be an accident because this matter had just been carefully filed in New York. There were motions to seal. There were redacted documents. Everything was done properly in New York to ensure that his medical information and his private information were kept private. Then the second that they had their chance to file something in Texas, bam! They put it all out there. It's just another low-down, dirty move by Team Blake. This entire group, in my opinion, plaintiffs and counsel, are just the worst. Can you imagine the reaction if someone had leaked some information for anything to do with Blake or anyone on her side, their addresses, and worst of all, their medical information? They would have had a fit. Just because Jed isn't a celebrity doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve his privacy. But anyway, back to this document. This really is a reasonable ask. But we find out that Team Blake refused this request. Of course they did. This is so unnecessary, and it's just not something that I see happen often. Back to the Murdaugh case, Dick Harpootlian just refused in the Alex appeal because the state had already been granted one extension of 3 months. That's already a pretty long extension. Then they asked for 3 more months. We can understand an objection like that. But really, Team Blake? But I can't say I'm surprised because they didn't even want to grant extensions during the fires in LA. These fires were burning out of control. People were fleeing for their lives. They were leaving behind all of their valuable possessions. Some people were abandoning their very expensive cars right there on the road. But Team Blake was like, no. So, in a time like that, they refused. We shouldn't be surprised that they're not showing any kindness now. Now let's get into more of why they're asking for this. The Wayfarer parties were served with 31 different sets of interrogatories from Blake, Ryan, Leslie Sloan, and Vision PR. 31 different sets. What else? They've served nearly 1,600 requests for production and 179 interrogatories. So just like they did with the phone subpoenas went way above and beyond, now they're asking for 1,600 documents in their request for production. So in addition to having to answer all of these memorandums against the motions to dismiss that every party in Team Blake filed, collecting their own discovery, preparing all of their own depositions, of course it's a struggle to respond to these interrogatories. Now, they've responded in good faith to more than 500, so they're almost a third of the way through the discovery, which is pretty amazing. But when you look at everything they have to do, It's not surprising that they asked for this extension, because that's not all. Looking back at this list of deadlines from the scheduling order, now we know that in all of these memoranda, in response to these motions to dismiss, Wayfarer has said these issues that they're all bringing up could easily be handled by an amended complaint. But here's the thing. The deadline for filing amended complaints is April 18th. That's just a week away. The court hasn't ruled on any of these motions to dismiss. If by chance it mentions that Blake Lively's motion to dismiss will not even be fully briefed until April 10th, and that came out today. It's 21 pages. It's a lot to consider. So here's the thing. All of this back and forth that we've seen has to be decided. If any of them are granted with leave to file an amended complaint, Wayfarer has to come up with an amended complaint. We've seen the size of these complaints. It's a lot of work. A week is not really enough time because they're also doing all of these other things that we just talked about. So until they know what the court rules about these motions to dismiss, they kind of have to be preparing an amended complaint, just in case he says, I give you leave to file. If that's not going to happen, they don't need one, and they can continue with all of these other steps that they need to do. So what they're asking is that instead of changing the date, or saying you have 15 days or you have 20 days, that they base it on the court's last issued ruling on the pending dismissal motions. And they're asking for 21 days after that date. The court probably won't rule on all of these motions on the same day. With Blake's final memorandum just coming out on the 10th, and none of the others before it being decided yet, it may not be decided till the 18th. There will be no time to put it all together by then. So they're saying whatever last day the court issues the last ruling, can we have 21 days after that? The New York Times has no objection, but of course, the Sloan parties and the Lively parties do. Their reason for this is they say the deadline is not dependent on the timing of the court's orders on the motion to dismiss. Wayfarer's like, yeah, we know, and that's exactly why we want this to happen this way, because we're going to need time after the judge rules to put this amended complaint together. They say that this is an unreasonable refusal, and there's a footnote about it. The footnote is taken from Local Civil Rule 26.4a, and it states that counsel are expected to cooperate with each other, consistent with the interests of their clients in all phases of discovery process, and to be courteous in their dealings with each other, including in matters relating to scheduling and timing of various discovery procedures. So even though they're on opposing sides and plaintiffs and defendants may have a lot of hostility towards each other, counsel is supposed to remain professional and courteous with each other. And here's the thing. One of the reasons that it's in your best interest to be cooperative with opposing counsel is because things can take an awful turn. It may very well turn out that in spite of all these demands for discovery, Team Blake doesn't find what it is they're looking for. It could be that somewhere in discovery, Team Justin finds something really, really good for their side. Team Blake, in either of those events, they might be the one begging for an extension of time. If they haven't shown that grace, they're not going to get that grace. So all in all, it really sounds like Blake and Ryan got attorneys who play just like them. For example, they dumped an 802-page document on Jed Wallace last week. This kind of thing is meant to overwhelm and overburden. And they're attempting to do the same thing to Justin. As I said, they file their documents at the last possible moment. They file them almost simultaneously so that they can overwhelm and overburden. They've requested this outrageous amount of discovery that Justin has been busy getting to them. But another thing I have to say about this is that in addition to it being overwhelming, they mentioned something in the document, and I agree. It shows that they still don't even know what they're looking for. And they're just hoping that if they get copious amounts of discovery, that they just might find something. When you're a skilled fisherman and you go fishing, you have in mind the specific type of fish that you want to catch. You don't want to waste your time catching a bunch of fish that you don't want. You know what you need. You have specialized bait. You have a specialized rod, you have a specialized boat, and you go to specific waters, often at a specific time of day or in a certain type of weather. You save yourself a lot of bother, a lot of time, and a lot of waste. When you don't know what you want, or don't know how to fish, or you're just hoping to catch anything, you throw out a huge net. You haul it up on the boat, and then you sort through it, hoping you found something good. This is what it sounds like Team Blake is doing. If we get it all, we might find something, rather than knowing exactly what they want and exactly how to get it, so that they're not having to sift through a whole net full of fish in the hopes that there's something. But you know what? Imagine the billing hours that they're charging Blake and Ryan for doing this. Keep paying, Blake and Ryan. Just keep paying. Every move you make, you're looking worse and worse. They hired CIA guy. They hired the other bigwig. They're pulling PR stunts out there on the regular. They're pretending Taylor and Blake are friends again, even though we've not seen that happen. We haven't seen any of Blake's friends rally around her whatsoever. Every time I go on Social Blade and look at the number of followers, they are still fleeing. They're losing hundreds of thousands to 500,000 per month of their Instagram followers. And it's not just affecting them. Taylor's losing that many. Hugh Jackman's losing a lot. Colleen Hoover's losing a lot. Sean Levy's losing a lot. Justin, on the other hand, continuously gains every month. There have been a few days out of the month that he's lost a small amount of followers, but most of the time he's gaining. What does that tell you? People aren't falling for this. I don't spend a lot of time on social media because I just don't have a lot of spare time. When I go, I usually go to Instagram because Instagram is fast. You see the post, you see quick little reels. You don't even have to see the comments. I mean, you have to choose to open up the comments. Most of the time, I don't. So I can just quickly see these posts or these short little reels, and in just a few minutes, I get an idea of what's going on. But I do see some TikToks over on Instagram and also on YouTube, and there are a lot of YouTubers who cover some things that they see on TikTok. It is overwhelmingly against Blake and Ryan. These accounts have dug into every aspect of these people's lives going back decades. And I mentioned it on a previous episode. I've never been one to really read a lot of celebrity gossip. I really don't care. So a lot of these things I had never heard before. But when I hear this stuff come out of their mouths, I'm like, how were their supporters okay with this? Some of this stuff is in more obscure places, like in the director's cuts of a DVD or just small tucked away places. Some of this stuff was on late night talk shows. You know, the one I saw of Ryan talking about putting his hands on Olivia Wilde's breasts and her pasties coming off on his sweaty hands and him exposing her to the cast. He's telling this story, and it's not just that he's telling it that it happened, but his comment about all the cast and crew that he's exposed this woman topless in front of, he describes it as them winning the lottery. And you know what the audience does? They laugh. That's not funny. How would they feel if it happened to them? Would they think it was funny? But he's gotten away with so much of this by people having this image of him, because he's always had a baby face until recently, and he always was playing a character, never serious. And so he got away with saying stuff that people never stopped and thought about what the actual words were that were coming out of his mouth. I never followed these people on Instagram. I never watched their YouTube videos. I didn't see any of these interviews. But for the people who did and were okay with it, what's wrong with you? And it's so hypocritical to me that his followers are okay with him doing this stuff. But they think Justin's the devil when he didn't do anything close to these things people are digging up on these guys. Not even close. You know, having their baby say this stuff that they had her say, knowing that she didn't want to say it, and then using this technique on her of, you know, it made me think of when the parents are trying to get their kids to eat something and they don't want to eat it and they say, oh, I'm going to eat it, or I'm going to give it to so-and-so. And they're like, no, it's mine. Anyone who's spent any time around children knows this tactic to make them do something they don't want to do. Now, most parents love their children. They use this tactic for what I said. They know their kids need nourishment. They know they need to eat their dinner. And so they'll use it to try to get them to eat their dinner because that's good for them. But to use this tactic that you know works to make your child do something that their moral compass at their little age is telling them is wrong for them to do, and they know they don't want to do it, and you use this trickery to make them do something against their own conscience. That's deplorable. Are people really okay with that? I mean, not everybody has unfollowed, so there must be some people that saw that and think it's okay. This new thing with Blake, she wasn't directing that movie. She was just an actress in this movie. And this is the way her mind works, which is probably how she thinks everybody else's mind works, and thinks the worst of people because that's the kind of trash in her own mind. But as an actress, decides that her character should reach out and grope this man. Just literally grab his manhood. And oh, that's just so funny. Oh, and the director just loved it. Told her to go at it harder. They actually had that conversation. Now here's the thing. In the commentary that I heard, she talks about saying, going up to my co-star and asking him, can I do this? Not because I want to, but because I think this is what my character would do. So technically, if that happened, she may have asked his permission before she did that. Does that make it okay? Why did that even pop in her head? That script was written. Those scenes were decided. Her co-star signed up for a certain script, and she uses this to complain about Justin. Oh, Justin wanted to add things. They made me uncomfortable. Did Justin ask to grab her private parts? Can you imagine if he had? But this double standard that they have, this was okay for her to ask this guy. From what I understand, he was pretty new to Hollywood. I don't want to assume that he's not from the United States, but that was the impression I got from something that I read. That he had only filmed the Crazy Rich Asians movie and that it hadn't even come out yet. I haven't looked that up, I just heard that in somebody's YouTube video. But if that's true, not every culture is like America's Hollywood. He might have been asked and might have been stunned, might have wanted to say no, and might have been scared to say no. He might have wondered, why is my co-star asking this of me? Can you imagine if I asked this of her? Did he give consent, and was it really how he felt? He may have. But this is the thing, what she's accused Justin of is not of doing something like that, but of wanting to add something that wasn't on the script that she signed up for. Justin was the director, and I showed you about the rules of these things. Directors can even add nudity. They just have to give 48 hours notice to the actors. But an actor asking for this? No, you've no right. It's just so hypocritical. Why is it okay for her to have asked something like that she would have had a fit about? And people are watching this, and they're hearing this, and they're reacting to this, and seeing this hypocrisy. And even with CIA guy and whoever that other big name guy is, I forgot his name now, I'm really tired, they're not even able to overcome this. Even the little snaps of her looking forlorn, isn't that the word they use, like she's Eeyore? Looking forlorn. I checked. It didn't stop the bleeding of followers. Because a sad face isn't going to overcome the hypocrisy that everybody's seeing. This double standard that they have. But my next episode that I've already written, not recorded yet, that's one of the two topics that it's about. So, things moved really fast last night and this morning after Team Justin filed this motion asking for an extension of time. I'm glad we got through the document, though, because we did get a little bit of an inside look at how these attorneys are playing. Even though Team Blake was one that asked for an extension of time before, and Team Justin granted it, and I feel like that reflects their personalities perfectly, Team Blake came back with a razor-sharp reply in opposition to this motion for an extension of time. They were claws out, teeth out, fangs out, every sort of weapon out, to say that Team Justin had absolutely no right to ask for this extension. They mocked, they humiliated, they said he doesn't know how to handle his time, completely glossed over the fact that they had completely drowned them in discovery requests. Leslie Sloan joined in, and to be honest, I didn't even read her motion. I just kind of skimmed through. She included a couple of exhibits, but she really voiced her opinion because by the time I saw hers, I saw that the order had already come out from the judge. It was very short, not a lot of detail, just basically said it's denied because Team Justin didn't show cause. I think the real part of it, the real problem with it was that it was going to change something on the actual scheduling order. Busy judges don't really like to see that happen. Their calendars are planned a long time in advance, and in order to stick to them, they have to keep all of the cases that they're taking care of right on time. So had it been something that would have just involved the attorneys, I think it would have been different. But because it was going to actually involve changing something in the scheduling order, I think that was the real kicker. But at any rate, it was denied, so everything will proceed as it was originally planned out to be. I'm just going to be glad when we get to the point where it's mostly behind the scenes discovery happening, and we might get a little angry letter or two every now and then when something goes wrong in discovery or whatever. Because these filings just piling up are out of control and so hard to keep up with. I have the other episode that I talked about that I had just written but haven't recorded. I'm also planning to cover Blake's response in support of her memorandum for her motion to dismiss. I think her attorneys went really hard, really aggressive, and they sound very confident, but their arguments are not as sound as they want you to believe. They say that not only do all of Justin's causes of action fail, but that they can't be remedied by an amended complaint. I say that's not so, and I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the possibility of, in an amended complaint, possibly adding another cause of action like conspiracy. I know they said they didn't want to do that and gave a reason for that in the past, but that's one of the things I want to focus on in that episode. I also, for my Murdaugh crew, we spent a lot of time on the conspiracy case that involved Mallory Beach's family. There's a new judge in town, and guess what? He's ruling on motions, and he's setting a trial date. This is huge. They tried so hard to get Mark and even Tabor removed from this case. Now we get to see who was involved in this and what they were doing. We've got knife fighters, we've got straw men, we've got PIs, and we're going to finally get to see what really happened. The little bit that I've been able to uncover is already intriguing. I haven't been able to get an entire picture to present to you, but it's really a shocking story. It even goes outside of the United States. But now that it's back in the swing of things, I can't wait to get that story finally pieced together and told as one complete story, beginning to end. So that's something very exciting to look forward to. Now, I just gotta get myself together and keep myself together well enough to get to all of these things. Till then, this is Cassidy O'Connell saying stay well and stay tuned.